The Bardstown murder mystery, the disappearance of Crystal Rogers. It is day 2 of the trial of Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson, both charged in the death of the Bardstown mother, Crystal Rogers. Welcome, everybody, to our 30-minute special report here on WHAS 11 Plus. I'm Doug Proffitt, WHAS 11 News. This murder mystery has enthralled the town of Bardstown for nearly 10 long years. Now we're learning some new details coming out every day in that courtroom. We want to get down to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where the trial is being held. Again, no cameras allowed in the courtroom by order of the judge, but Shay McAllister and Alexander Goldberg have 2 seats in that courtroom. And Shay, Detective John Snow, the former detective, finishing up his testimony this morning. Jury shown a lot from that initial police interview between Brooks Houck and John Snow, including when Nick Houck started to enter this investigation for the first time.
Yeah, so the jury had a lot to watch here. This interview is several hours long. Of course, it was broken up into different little pieces, but the point of bringing John Snow onto the stand was to be able to show all of this evidence from the interview. Like you mentioned, John Snow said that there was one specific thing that happened that was the first time they started to consider Nick Houck as a possible suspect. You can listen in.
Hello? No. I'm up here. I know that you didn't know. I'm up here in this interview with the Detective Snow. I've been up here a good little while. I'm filling out this this statement here and everything. Are you telling me that's what I need to do? I'm not. I know that. But the way that I look at it is, I'm innocent. I ain't done nothing wrong. What, you know? I know you told me innocent people have got jammed up, but if you're telling me to leave, I'll get up and leave. If you want me to. I know I'm going through a lot, but I'm trying to get this guy to help me. I don't think she's ran off with some other guy. I don't believe that. You can't make me think that. No. Yeah, so do I. I'll do exactly what you're telling me to do right now. Do you want me to get up and leave? Man, I don't think these guys. I don't think these people have got a vindictive just to skin me for no reason. Man, this is not their family. This is not.
Up during the interview was some unusual behavior by Brooks Houck, at least what he said he was doing on the night of July 3rd and into July 4th. One of those things was mentioning that they left the farm around midnight to go home on July 3rd, Brooks, Crystal, and their son Eli, who was about 2 years old at the time. The detective, John Snow, said this was really unusual because typically 2-year-olds are not awake that late at night. Brooks goes on to say, well, ours was. He wouldn't go to sleep if any lights were on in the house, and Crystal was still awake playing games on her phone, so Eli was still awake. Here's that interaction.
All right, so you guys, you've taken your walk. The fire is down, maybe not out, but it's down enough, and you're leaving, and it looks, again, looking at the video, looks like it's about 5 minutes till midnight.
All right.
That's to me, and I've got a couple of kids, you know, but everybody parents a little differently. To me, it seems a little late to be out on the farm with a 2.5-year-old. Where is he at midnight? Has he been asleep in the car for a while? Is he still
he's still wide open, and and any night he's so used to sleeping so later in the morning. His normal day, that's his 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. Really? 11, because she sleeps much later in the morning. She stays up. So and it's always been that way.
So he's like people do. Midnight.
He's wide open.
Yeah. Okay.
And finally, this next one is one that many have heard before after the Steve Lawson trial. It was the phone call with Steve Lawson. This was actually the reason we learned today that John Snow, the detective, wanted Brooks Houck to come back in for an interrogation. He said he found this call in phone records, and Brooks Houck had never said anything about it before. So he called Brooks and said, "We found some new things I want to ask you about. Can you come on in?" Brooks agreed. He was very cooperative. He came in to the police department. One thing that was a little bit different, he brought a recorder with him in his pocket. John Snow said that he saw him fumbling with it later on video. But of course, this phone call was really the reason John Snow wanted to bring him in today.
Hey, Steve. Hey, I can't hear you real good. I'm gonna ask you to speak up a little bit, okay?
Okay, sir.
Hey, I was wanting to know. Hey, I've got some things going on next week. I'm gonna need your help with it. Are you already booked up, or can you help me?
I haven't moved up yet. I'm still looking for a place. That's why I needed them numbers from you.
All right. Well, I can write them all down and get them there for you. But I was actually talking about doing some more work with your little skid steer and so forth. Mine's still broke down.
Well, like I said, get with me tomorrow. I'm coming. I know you have a hard time hearing me because it's where I'm located at.
All right.
So just get in touch with me tomorrow and we'll see what we can do. But my question, I just want to tell you, I'm sorry about everything that's going on in your life, brother, and I got you in my prayers.
I said it is a very difficult and trying time, but I appreciate you you saying that. But hey, I need your help while I got you on the phone here. Do you remember the other night you called me really late, and I forgot what you asked me. Can you? I guess we wasn't on the phone. I might have been tired. I know it was pretty late at night. Can you remember what you asked me or what you were after? I can't remember.
Yes, sir, I can. I called to ask you for them numbers for a house.
Oh, for a rental house.
Yes, sir, I did.
And what did I forgot? What did I tell you?
You told me that you would call, what's her name, Katie or whatever, she handles all that.
Crystal.
Crystal, okay, I apologize.
Yeah.
And you said she handles all that, and that you would get back with me on it.
All right. Thank you so much, now.
Hey, if there's anything I can do, you give me a call.
Thank you. You have a good night now.
Yes, sir. God bless you.
Thank you.
Okay. So that begs a question in my mind.
All right.
If she's in the truck next to you when he called, why would you need to call her about getting numbers for rental
Because
property?
being that late at night, we're headed to the house. You know, I just wouldn't. She normally's not going to deal with stuff that late. And I mean, I probably didn't even look at the phone to see who it was calling me. I'm sure I just answered it. You know.
But he said you told him that you'd need to call her.
All right.
Why would you need to call her? I mean, that's an odd phrase for someone who's sitting next to you in the truck.
Back here in Bowling Green, my colleague Alexandra Goldberg has joined me here because this wasn't the only phone call that was mentioned today when John Snow was on the stand. When Brooks Houck's attorney, Steve Shoring, got up to ask some questions, he brought up a totally different set of phone calls.
Exactly, Shay. It was in this cross-examination where we learn for the first time Brooks Houck first attempt to get in touch with Crystal Rogers the following day. Steve Shoring brought up phone records of Brooks Houck attempting to call Crystal on July 4th twice, once at 9:06 a.m. and another one around noon, a third phone call on July 5th at 6 p.m. And it appears they all went to voicemail, according to John Snow. But this is the defense's approach to try to paint this picture that Brooks is a concerned boyfriend, trying to look for Crystal, not only trying to message her cell phone, but also the cell phone of friends and family. Houck calls a relative, her cousin, and says, "Will you try to get a hold of Crystal for me?" He can't get a hold of Crystal. She replies no, so he texts a friend. He asks, "Is Crystal with you?" And the friend says, "No, I haven't seen her." Now, the phone calls weren't the only line of communication between Brooks and Crystal. He also sends a text message to Crystal. Says, quote, "Everyone is worried sick. Please call me back." Now, between
Well, and I want to make sure we say too that the prosecution was bringing up something about those phone calls, the timing specifically.
Right, we did learn through an interrogation with Jon Snow that Brooks actually was up earlier that morning before that 9 a.m. phone call. He was getting ready himself, waking up Eli, going to McDonald's, and driving to the Houck family farm before that first phone call. That's a great point, Shay.
Saying that he had been awake for about 3 hours before he tried to call his girlfriend, and Jon Snow saying, I know if I woke up and my girlfriend or my wife isn't in bed and I think she's going to be, I'd probably be picking up the phone a little bit sooner.
But to add on to that, Shoring actually questioned Snow, saying Brooks wasn't worried at first because she's gone off before. Snow says only if they've been fighting. Shoring says, well, Crystal believed Brooks was better to Eli than the other kids, and Jon Snow says, but they had not fought about that on that day. Now, Doug, before I send it back to you, I do want to mention we did hear for the first time during this trial today from Kevin Coleman, who's Joseph Lawson's attorney. Now, there was really not a lot of words exchanged here. He confirmed with Snow that every time he said Lawson, he was referencing Steve and not Joey. Snow said, that's correct. Doug.
Okay, Alexandra and Shay, thank you very much. Now let's go to WHAS 11 legal analyst, Louisville attorney Nick Mudd of the Mudd Law Group. He's been following this case closely for more than a year now for us. And we once again want to remind people that cameras have been banned from the courtroom there in Bowling Green. And Shay and Alexandra working off their very thorough notes there coming out of the courtroom. You want to pick up right away on what Alexandra just ended on. And Shay, we're talking about the text messages that was brought up by defense attorney Steve Shoring. Why do you think that is could be resonating with the jury? Why was it important to spend some time on that?
Two reasons, Doug. Number one, I think it's very important. The prosecution didn't bring it up, okay? You generally, as a prosecutor, want to get everything out there. You don't want to look like you're hiding something. And the way Steve Shoring framed it was in a way that was such that, hey, you know, prosecution didn't show you this, but look, there's all these other text messages that he's acted concerned.
And phone calls.
And phone calls, contacted Crystal's family members, looking for her, asked for a number from another family member, sent another phone call, you know, calling Crystal. And, you know, the explanation when Jon Snow discussed about, you know I would get up and call earlier if my girlfriend or wife wasn't there, you know, the explanation was given as well, which is she's gone before. You know, they've had tumultuous relationship in the past, and she's left and not spoken with him. And in fact, Brooks Houck sent a message that said, you know, Crystal, you can't run from your problems or something of that nature.
As a defense attorney, why is that impressive to you? Because don't you think there's probably people on that jury thinking, well, this was all planned by him. This was all because he knew they would come after phone records later. You've been talking about phone records for about a year now. He knew that would show up later in any kind of investigation if they were interviewing him.
Right. And you know, that's going to come down to arguing with lawyers. I mean, that's just being good lawyering, okay? Certainly the prosecution's going to frame it as like, look, this is complete fabrication. This is a setup. And you know, the defense, ironically, though, has a defense here. And I'll tell you, Doug, I know that I said it was too early to call it, but I don't think Brooks Houck is going to testify. I think they are building his defense. They have given, you know, the statements have been played from him. And so at this point, I don't think they'll call him later in the trial.
You told me you were going to take about a week to come to that conclusion. Right. Why are you now confident that Brooks Houck won't be put on that stand? Are things here on day two trending his way at the moment?
It appears that way, you know, and certainly you never know what's in the mind of a jury. But basically, his statement right after she's gone missing is played for the most part, a good portion of it. Secondly, his phone records, text messages, things like that have come in front of the jury. So, you know, right now, as the way it stands, I don't think he has anything to gain getting on the stand.
Interestingly enough, that Joseph Lawson's name he's in the courtroom. Right. He's on trial, tampering with physical evidence and conspiracy to commit murder, just like his father was convicted on those same two charges. And we heard Steve Lawson's voice there in that interview when Jon Snow was talking to Brooks Houck. Joseph Lawson's name's come up like 4 times. What's that all about?
You know, I'll tell you, Doug, Joseph Lawson is on trial, but it sure doesn't feel like it. You know, I think his name was only mentioned, as you said today, 4 times, and it was by Steve Shoring during a cross-examination of Jon Snow. He was barely mentioned in an opening statement. He's barely been mentioned, if at all, by any of the other witnesses that have testified, and it was only brought up very, very minutely by Steve Shoring and asking some questions. And, you know, the defense with Kevin Coleman and Robert Boyd, they've just kind of sit back and not ask him any questions, really because they haven't had a reason to. I mean, their client, really nothing's been provided to the jury so far, you know, on this today of trial and yesterday that really implicates him at this point.
I want to go over some other points. At the end of this 30 minutes, I do want to ask you who won the day. I did that for you last night as well. Let's talk about the fact that the name Nick Houck came up in an interesting way today. We saw that interaction that we just played for you, where during the interview, Nick calls his brother Brooks and says, "Quit talking, hang up on the conversation, just get out of there." And Jon Snow said on the stand today, the former lead detective, that was the first time that the light bulb moment for police in Bardstown, that was the first time that they even were possibly tying Nick into this wide family affair plan.
All right. You know, it's really going to depend on how the jury interprets it. Because on one hand, it looks very suspicious. Your brother's a police officer. Why is he not telling you to fully cooperate? If you didn't do anything wrong, why is he telling you, hey, go on in there, talk to them, give a full statement, and assist the police as much as you can to find the mother of your child? The flip side of that, though, is any lawyer, and most police officers will tell you, if a family member's been interrogated, they're going to say, hey, look, you know, no offense to the police, no offense to the investigator, no offense to a prosecutor, but we're not speaking unless an attorney is present. And I mean, I advise clients that, hey, we're happy to talk to you, but you better have an attorney present.
One other thing I just thought came up in the courtroom today that I noticed in our blog. By the way, I follow our excellent blog, WHAS11.com. It's written by our digital journalist, Joseph Garcia, along with the reporting from Shay McAllister and Alexandra Goldberg. And I know, Nick, you follow it well, too. And right in today's blog, there's an interesting interaction about a July 7th interview Jon Snow was doing with Brooks Houck, and he says, you know, I asked him, tell me about your worst day. And he said, Brooks couldn't answer it.
Right.
Couldn't give him an answer. Why would something like that come up? Is that important to have in the jury's mind?
You know, it was an odd question, but it was odd not to have an answer. So, you know, a lot of these interviews and stuff, I mean, these are things the jury's taking notes on, looking at, and seeing his demeanor. You know, how is he answering the question? What are his facial expressions? And we don't have high quality video, but we have enough that a jury can look and say, is he been truthful? Is this pre-planned? Is this a plot? Or is he truly looking like a concerned boyfriend and giving a plausible, reasonable explanation for everything?
All right, now we want to go back to Shay McAllister in Warren County, Kentucky. Of course, that's Bowling Green. And Shay, after Jon Snow, there were several rapid-fire witnesses the prosecution called. Danny Singleton was called to the stand and is the one who Rosemary Houck, Brooks' mother, allegedly approached about starting this entire plot. What did Danny Singleton have to say?
Doug, let me start by saying Danny Singleton is almost unrecognizable. I did not know it was him, and I walked by him in the hall, and when I sat down in the courtroom, I was shocked that was him. I covered him 10 years ago when he was arrested on perjury charges. He doesn't even look like the same person, but he did stick to the same message that he has been telling police since way back then in 2016. What he said is that he was a former employee of Brooks Houck, that he had worked for him for more than a decade. He alleges that Rosemary came to the job site where he was working just a couple of weeks before Crystal went missing and asked him if he could find someone to, quote, get rid of her. He says that he told her, in this place with enough money, you can do anything, but that his involvement didn't go any further. At this point, it was Jim Lasowski, one of the prosecuting assistants who was doing this examination there. He said, after you talked to Rosemary Houck, what did you do with the information? Danny said, I just kept it to myself. He was asked, did you go to police? Did you go to Brooks Houck? Did you go back to Rosemary? Danny said, no. I didn't do any of that, just kept it to myself. But he said, this is the truth. The prosecution also preemptively hit on, later you were arrested on perjury charges, you were arrested for lying, you were put in jail, and you were later released. Were you released because of a promise to police to say something related to this crime? And he said, no. What I said to police was the truth. And that was that comment that he just made here. Well, you won't be surprised to learn that Steve Shoring, Brooks Houck's attorney, had a lot to say to him, saying, well, hold on a second. You're telling me that you're sitting in jail. You've been there for, at that point, it had been 5 months. You've got this massive bond you can't pay. You're uncomfortable. It's unpleasant. You're in jail. And police come to you, and all of a sudden, you have this story that they need about how Rosemary came to you and asked you to get rid of Crystal. And he says, yeah, that's the truth. That's what happened. And the defense attorney, Shoring, is saying, so they didn't promise you anything. They didn't say to get lesser charges. You can get out of jail right now if you say this when we ask you to. And he stuck to his guns here. Danny Singleton said, no. He said, I had not made anything up. He said that has been the truth the entire time. He says that Rosemary never followed up with him. He said he didn't want to go to police about it, but that he was telling the truth. He just stuck by that. Jim Lasowski, the prosecutor on this case, comes back in after Shoring to really hit home on that point, saying, did Rosemary Houck ask you to find someone to get rid of Crystal, yes or no? And he said, yes, that's the truth. And you could tell that Danny Singleton didn't want to be up there. As soon as he was dismissed, he was out of that courtroom, trying to get far, far away from all of this. But he was just one of tons of witnesses we heard from today, and they were quick, rapid fire, like you said. All of them brought on for one purpose. The prosecution brought them in to poke holes in a written statement that Brooks Houck had made for police during that police interview that the jurors had watched at the beginning of the day. Police asked him to sit down and write down everything you did on July the 3rd, the day Crystal disappeared. Put it all down on paper. We want to know where you are, what you were doing. Well, today we heard from a lot of the people who were listed on that paper. I'm going to bring in Alexandra Goldberg to walk us through those witnesses.
Right, Shay, completely right. Witness after witness trying to poke holes in that written statement from Brooks Houck. We heard from a county clerk in Nelson County who said that there were no eviction files filed that day of July 3rd.
And he had mentioned that he had evictions that he needed to file.
Right, he had said that in his written statement, and you'll see the similar theme throughout. We heard from someone who works doing vinyl siding and gutters for Brooks. He said that he had no contact with Brooks on July 3rd. Another example there, we've heard from someone who works at an electric company, and Brooks had said that he spent the day trying to replace light bulbs and some street lights. Well, this woman says, nope, she didn't see Brooks on that day, July 3rd. The list goes on. I'll lay a couple more out for us here. We heard from an HOA president who said that he was under violation for a lawn that wasn't manicured, though Brooks said that he was cutting grass. And I'll give us one last one here. We heard from someone who manages a landfill who says that Brooks was not there spotted at the landfill that day.
All of those things Brooks Houck had put on his list of places where he was. We should add the defense came back and said, well, he didn't say that he was there, or he didn't say that he did that. He said he wanted to do that, or he could have done that, or should have done that. Ultimately, though, in the interrogation, Jon Snow had said, put down where you were. What time were you there? Who did you talk to there? I mean, they asked for specifics, and when the prosecution went back to double check that list, it wasn't adding up.
Exactly. In defense, though, they looked for the specifics and how it was written. They said, Brooks was saying that there were evictions coming up. It doesn't mean that he necessarily filed anything about his evictions. Mm-hmm. We saw that theme consistently throughout. There's one other witness who testified here that I think is important to tell you about. This witness owns the Radio Shack in Bardstown, and she says that her store sold a voice recorder to Brooks on July 6th. He, quote, asked for the best. She said that she actually ended up printing out a picture of Brooks, who was with Eli, holding that phone recorder, and gave it to the FBI.
And it's possible that that was the phone recorder that was used the very next day in his pocket when he went into that police interview.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So Doug, coming up tomorrow, more witnesses. There could be as many as 50 over the next couple of weeks. So far, we have heard from about 14, so a long way to go.
Shay, I've just got a question for you. Something that struck me in reading on our blog the last few days. I saw that they had in the courtroom had been showing surveillance camera videos of some nature where Crystal Rogers was in them, actually alive, moving around. And it struck me that I've never seen any video of her ever. We've always just seen the photographs in this entire 10-year case. What do those videos show, and what ran through your mind? And I was wondering if you were able to pick up any reaction to the jury when they saw that.
Doug, it's so funny you say that, because I did the exact same thing that I did yesterday. I said, I have seen so many photos of Crystal. I feel like I know so much about her, but I had never seen video of her. And it was a moment to actually see her walking through Walmart with her children. It was different because we've been talking about her for 10 years, and there you got to see her just being a mom, just a woman who's in Walmart. And I'm not sure that it hit the jurors in the same way. They haven't been following this for 10 years like we have, but it was interesting. I do want to mention, you ask about that Walmart video. This was fascinating to me today. One of the very few juror questions today was about the outfit she was wearing in that Walmart video. She was wearing a white tank and black leggings, very obviously the black and white. And the juror raised their hand, turned in a question to ask Detective Snow, did you ever find those clothes? Did you ever find what she was wearing in the Walmart? And as we were discussing it afterwards, we were saying, what a fascinating question, because she thought she was heading to a romantic date night. You know, surely she wouldn't have still been in the same black and white, Erin's outfit that she was wearing earlier in the day. The answer, no, they never found those clothes.
What a great question from the juror, and well, thanks, Shay. It just really bowled me over when I saw that, and I thought, it's been 10 years, and if, of course, this trial was televised, everybody would be seeing that video. Maybe it will come out later. Appreciate you both, Alexandra Goldberg and Shay McAllister there in Bowling Green. Now, Nick, I guess that kind of video testimony can be very powerful. Even, as Shay said, that the jury pool may not be realizing how significant it is to those of us who've never really seen her alive, moving around on video.
Right. I do think it was an interesting question from the juror, and it was a great question. I mean, you could kind of see where the juror's mind was going there a little bit. Were those clothes found? And then, the question is, why weren't they found? Where are those clothes? What was she wearing that night? We assumed if she was going to a romantic evening, she was going to be wearing something else. So I think it was a great question from the jury, and certainly it tells us the jury's paying attention in this case.
Something else came out of the detective, John Snow, today in the back and forth in the testimony. He said a couple told him that they saw Crystal alive on the 5th of July in a red sedan, and that she was distraught and upset. We've always been reporting that it was the 4th of July weekend, but we never really know a date, do we? Is it the 3rd, the 4th? They're saying she was the 5th. Is that testimony credible?
Credible? Probably not. I mean, we don't have that specific witness to come in and testify, but the importance of it is that's something the defense is going to jump all over, especially in closing argument, and say, look, you've even heard a day or so after she goes missing, someone sees her and she's distraught. And, she's in a red sedan. So I think that's going to play into defense more so, but certainly we don't know who that person was. We don't know who these witnesses, they didn't testify. So credibility-wise, it's not going to, doubt the jury will give it too much weight.
As they just reported, at least maybe 50 witnesses going to be called here, including Ed Mattingly, the former sheriff who's first named Brooks Houck as the chief suspect. He did it many, many years ago, and then we waited and we waited. There was never an arrest.
Right. And it's going to be interesting what he says on the stand, and certainly why he came to that conclusion. Now, he can't ultimately speak to the ultimate issue here or Brooks Houck's guilt, but certainly he can talk about what he did in his investigation, and he can certainly say why it led to Brooks Houck in that investigation to ultimately being the primary suspect.
One other detail that for those of us who follow this, I thought was so important that came out of John Snow, the detective. He said after the first 4 years of investigating this, she'd been gone 4 years, they had made no arrests, and they had no evidence whatsoever. 4 years.
Right.
I mean, you can almost call this a cold case after 4 years, and then later we saw the major FBI searches.
Right. That's going to play into the defense, and I'll tell you why. They're going to say, look, It's 4 years. There was not any proof to indict Brooks Houck at that point. Nothing has changed after that 4 years. And because of that, you know, pressure, pressure, pressure. Remember in the opening, that's what we heard from the defense, from Brooks Houck. You know, everybody, the police have been pressured to solve this crime. The media has pressured the police to solve this crime. The public's pressured the police to solve this crime. And so, you know, I think what the defense is going to argue here in closing is to say, look, you know, 4 years, nothing changed then, and he shouldn't, you know, he wasn't indicted. What changed in that following 6 years? Because we really haven't heard anything else that did change.
And again, as we sit here on day 2, once again, the other side players are so involved in this case. People who've never been arrested.
Right.
You know, unindicted co-conspirators.
Right.
But they certainly are playing such a major role. How in the end is the jury to separate Rosemary Houck, Nick Houck, Danny Singleton, when it comes down to decision day?
Well, the question's going to be how they tie it in. I mean, we've got a long road ahead, Doug. So, you know, don't think for a second I'm saying the defense is going to win this thing, because I'm not. I'm just saying we've heard today from Danny Singleton that said Rosemary Houck stated that she wanted to get rid of Crystal Rogers. And she talked to Danny Singleton about that. He testified. Now, the question is going to be, how is the prosecution going to tie that into Brooks Houck? Because we have not heard that yet, and I assume that's going to be forthcoming soon.
And we should emphasize that your background is as a former prosecutor here in Jefferson County in the Violent Crimes Unit.
Absolutely. I mean, I've done dozens of homicides, prosecuted dozens of them. And certainly, you know, you kind of have to have a roadmap. They have an idea of where they're going, okay? And, you know, you don't give everything up front. That's not how you kind of, sometimes you breadcrumb it and lead it up. You know, you don't want to come out of the gate with your strongest witness always. And I assume that's what they're doing. They're going to kind of build and piece it together, piece by piece by piece. That's what you do with a circumstantial case. You don't have a gold nugget. You got to fit the puzzle pieces together to get a conviction day after day after day. And I think that's what they're ultimately going to do here.
My final question to you is I'm going to ask you every night as we are going to go possibly to the 8th of July. I asked you last night who won the day. This is just day 2. We'll put that in perspective. You gave it to the defense last night. Who won the day today?
It's tough to say. I am curious how much weight the jury is giving the Danny Singleton character. He's been convicted of, or at least charged, we know, with perjury in the past. But if the jury gives his testimony a lot of weight and they can link it to Brooks Houck, that's extremely bad for the defense. On the flip side, again, Steve Shoring, cross-examination, he did the same thing he did in an opening statement yesterday. He gave a plausible explanation for every single thing that the prosecution hit on. They struck a blow against Brooks Houck. Steve Shoring came back and said, no, counter blow. So, you know, it was almost like a stalemate today.
A stalemate. So yesterday gets the defense, today it's a wash.
Except I don't know how they look at the Danny Singleton guy. That's the question, is his credibility today, and I don't know that.
All right. For Nick Mudd, I'm Doug Proffitt. We thank you so much for watching this special report on WHAS 11 Plus from WHAS 11 News. Trial continues tomorrow morning in Bowling Green on Friday. We have coverage throughout the day, of course, on WHAS 11 newscasts. And we're going to be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. right here for a deep dive on the day's proceedings in the Crystal Rogers murder mystery on WHAS 11 Plus. Thank you for watching.